I am Mark Miller, and I am 34 years old. Exactly 2 months ago, I received a 7-word text message that completely destroyed my entire world. While I was sitting in dead-stop traffic on Interstate 25, looking at the shiny new keys to the $400,000 house I had just bought my parents, along with the VIP ticket confirmations for a $21,000 luxury family cruise I fully funded, my own mother texted me, "You're not coming, Dad wants just family." And while I was desperately trying to process that cold, hard dismissal, my family was busy laughing at me. They were mocking me in a secret group chat, calling me a pathetic fool who was good for nothing but swiping a credit card. They humiliated me behind my back while reaping the benefits of my years of exhausting hard work. But there is one major thing they did not know. That beautiful suburban house they were living in was strictly in my name, and my cutthroat real estate lawyer was already on speed dial. And now, they are sleeping in a cramped, bedbug-infested motel room off the highway, desperately begging me to answer the phone. Before I tell you exactly what happened and how I took back every single thing they stole from me, please hit that like button if you believe in absolute justice. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let's go back to the exact moment the blindfold was ripped from my eyes. The afternoon sun was glaring off the windshield of the SUV in front of me. The traffic was crawling, the kind of bumper-to-bumper Denver gridlock that usually makes my blood boil. But that day, I was completely numb. Sitting on the pristine leather passenger seat next to me was a glossy, cheerfully wrapped gift bag. Inside that bag was a set of custom-engraved luggage tags and a pair of delicate, expensive polarized sunglasses I had bought for my mom to wear on the deck of the cruise ship. I could almost picture her wearing them, leaning against the balcony railing, breathing in the salty ocean air, and finally looking at me with genuine pride. I thought those gifts, on top of the all-expenses-paid Caribbean vacation, would be the final piece of the puzzle. I thought it would finally earn me a place in their hearts. My phone vibrated violently against the center console. I glanced down. It was a message from my mother. I actually smiled before the screen even unlocked. I assumed it was a message expressing her excitement about the trip, or maybe a rare, unprompted thank you. Then I read the words, "You're not coming. Dad wants just family." That was it. 7 words. No apology. No long-winded explanation. No phone call to soften the blow. Just a flat, sterile, and brutal dismissal. My smile did not just fade. It shattered. My breath hitched, trapping a sharp pocket of air in my lungs. My chest physically ached as if someone had reached through my ribs and squeezed my heart with a vice. I blinked rapidly, rubbing my eyes, convinced the glare from the sun was making me read it wrong. Maybe it was a horrific typo. Maybe she had sent it to the wrong person. But no, the contact name Mom stared back at me, anchoring those 7 words in terrifying reality. This was the cruise I had paid for. The cruise I had spent the last 6 months meticulously planning down to the last dinner reservation and shore excursion. The luxury vacation I had covered entirely with my year-end performance bonus. The dream trip that was supposed to be our ultimate family bonding experience, completely funded by my bank account. And just like that, my presence was deemed an inconvenience. The driver behind me laid on their horn. The light had turned green. I looked up, my vision slightly blurred, and realized my hands were trembling so violently that the steering wheel was shaking. I pressed the gas pedal, but my foot felt like it belonged to someone else. The gift bag on the passenger seat suddenly looked like a cruel joke. The expensive sunglasses felt like a monument to my own pathetic desperation for their love. I drove for another 10 miles with absolute silence filling the cabin of my car. My mind was a chaotic storm of memories, but one clear, deafening realization began to rise above the noise. Dad wants just family. The implication of that phrase was a physical slap to the face. I was not family. I never was. Not real family anyway. I was the provider, the facilitator, the walking, talking ATM machine. I was the person you called when the roof leaked, when the transmission blew, or when the mortgage was past due. I was a financial utility, not a beloved son. I pulled my car over into the empty parking lot of a strip mall and put the engine in park. I sat there as the Denver sky turned a bruised, dusky purple. For 3 decades, I had lived in a dense fog of familial obligation. I thought love was a transaction. I thought being a good son meant being endlessly generous. But sitting in that driver's seat, staring at the digital text bubble on my phone, the fog completely evaporated. They had what they wanted. They had the luxury vacation. They had the $400,000 roof over their heads. The transaction was complete, and the receipt was in the trash. I was no longer required. A cold, unfamiliar sensation began to spread through my veins. It was not sorrow. The time for crying had passed. It was a glacial, terrifying clarity. I picked up my phone, bypassed my mother's contact, and scrolled down to the letter J. I pressed dial. "James," I said, my voice steady and devoid of any emotion as my lawyer answered the phone. "That property on Elm Street, the one I let my parents move into. I want you to start the paperwork to list the real estate on the market. Immediately. I want a buyer by the end of the month." I hung up the phone. I looked at the gift bag one last time, grabbed it, and tossed it into the back seat. The rescue missions were officially over. To truly understand the absolute audacity of what my parents did, you have to understand the foundation our relationship was built on. Growing up, I was thoroughly convinced that the word love was spelled rescue. My entire existence in the Miller household revolved around a single unspoken job description. Be the fixer. Be the responsible one. Be the miniature adult who cleans up the catastrophic messes you did not create. It started out small when I was just a kid. My younger brother, Vincent, would break a window playing baseball in the house, or he would fail a class because he refused to do the homework. I would be the one to step up, take the heat, or sit up with him until 2 in the morning doing his assignments. I did it because my parents were constantly stressed about money and life, and Vincent's tears always magically erased his guilt. I learned at a very young age that my quiet, uncomplaining sacrifice was much easier for my parents to digest than a loud, messy confrontation. Vincent was the golden child. I was the janitor. The first massive rescue operation happened when I was 16 years old. The 2008 financial crash hit our family like a Category 5 hurricane. My dad ran a small, independent construction business, and when the housing market went belly up, his company folded overnight. I vividly remember the heavy, suffocating silence that draped over our house during those months. The phone would ring, and my parents would just stare at it, terrified it was another debt collector. Dad spent his days sinking into the living room couch, watching daytime television with the volume muted, stewing in a toxic mixture of depression and wounded pride. Meanwhile, Mom was in the kitchen trying to stretch a single box of generic mac and cheese into dinner for 4 days straight. I was a junior in high school, and while my friends were going to football games and prom, I was working 2 grueling part-time jobs. From 3 to 7 in the afternoon, I stocked heavy cans at a local grocery store. From 8 to midnight, I wiped down sticky tables and scrubbed pots at a Greasy Spoon diner out on the highway. I would come home smelling like bleach and stale French fries. My paychecks were incredibly small, barely a drop in the bucket, but to me they were my entire world. That money was my college fund. It was my ticket out of that suffocating environment. One bitter Tuesday night, I came home after a double shift. The house was completely dark except for a single dim bulb over the kitchen table. My mom was sitting there, her face buried in her hands, quietly sobbing over a massive stack of past-due utility and mortgage bills. The bright red final notice stamps seemed to glow in the dark. I did not even hesitate. My conditioning kicked in instantly. I walked down the hall to my bedroom, dropped to my knees, and pulled out an old shoebox I kept hidden under my mattress. Inside was a thick wad of crumpled $10 and $20 bills. It was a little over $500. It was every single cent I had to my name. I walked back into the kitchen and set the money down on the table right on top of the foreclosure warning. My mom stopped crying. She looked at the crumpled bills, and then she looked up at me. I expected to see immense gratitude. I expected a hug. Instead, her face twisted into a strange, unsettling mixture of profound relief and bitter resentment. "Oh, Mark," she whispered, her voice tight, "you shouldn't have to do this." But her hand shot out and grabbed the cash anyway. She swept it off the table and into her pocket without another word. She never paid me back. Not a dime. And more importantly, she never thanked me. That moment solidified the dynamic for the rest of my life. I became the emergency contingency plan. When it came time for college, Vincent decided he absolutely had to go to an expensive, out-of-state private liberal arts school. My parents had zero savings, their credit was garbage, and Vincent refused to apply for scholarships because it was too much paperwork. So who do you think they turned to? I was 22, working my first entry-level corporate finance job, living in a shoebox apartment, and eating ramen noodles to pay off my own student debt. But my parents relentlessly guilt-tripped me. They told me it was my duty as the successful older brother to pave the way. So I co-signed Vincent's massive student loans. Vincent's college experience lasted exactly 3 semesters. He dropped out, claiming the professors stifled his creative genius, and moved back into my parents' basement. The loan payments immediately defaulted. My dad called me in a panic, yelling that this would ruin the family's name and destroy Vincent's credit score forever. "He'll never be able to get a fresh start, Mark. You have to fix this," my dad shouted through the phone. So I fixed it. I took on freelance consulting gigs on weekends. I worked 80-hour weeks until my vision blurred and my back ached. Took me 4 brutal years, but I paid off every single cent of Vincent's student debt using my salary. When I handed Vincent the final zero balance statement, his only response was a smug smirk. "Man, you're so lucky you're obsessed with money and numbers," he chuckled, as if my grueling labor was just a quirky hobby and not a desperate attempt to save him from financial ruin. Vincent never held a steady job. He bounced from one ridiculous startup idea to another. A craft brewery that never opened, an app that never launched, all funded by my parents. And my parents, in turn, were quietly funded by me. I was paying their car insurance. I was covering their property taxes. Every unexpected medical bill, every broken water heater, it all landed squarely in my lap. They didn't call me Mark anymore. They called me the responsible one. For years, I wore that title like a badge of honor. I foolishly believed it meant they respected me. I never realized that responsible was just their secret code word for convenient. My career skyrocketed in my late 20s. I was promoted to a senior financial director role. By the time I was 33, I was making a very comfortable 6-figure income, had a robust 401k, and a flawless credit score. You would think my parents would be incredibly proud. Instead, my financial stability seemed to deeply offend them. It highlighted their own massive failures, and they hated me for it. The ultimate slap in the face came a year ago. My parents were being evicted from their rental house because the landlord was selling the property. They were in a total panic, facing the very real prospect of homelessness. So, I stepped up for the ultimate rescue. I found a beautiful, 3-bedroom suburban home in a quiet, safe neighborhood. It was listed at $400,000. I put down an $80,000 cash down payment, secured the mortgage entirely in my name, and handed them the keys. All they had to do was pay the basic utilities. I thought this grand gesture would finally earn me their unconditional love. But on the day I moved them in, my mom walked through the spacious living room, ran her hand over the granite countertops, and sighed heavily. "It's a bit flashy, don't you think?" she muttered, not even looking at me. "Money really changes people, Mark. It makes them cold and materialistic. I just hope you don't lose your soul in all this corporate greed." My dad grunted in agreement from the hallway. "Don't forget where you came from, boy. And make sure the spare bedroom is set up nice for Vincent. He needs a quiet space for his new podcast studio." I stood in the kitchen of the home I just bought for them, feeling completely invisible. I swallowed the massive lump of hurt in my throat and nodded. I never forgot where I came from. That was my fundamental flaw. I never forgot the look on my mother's face when she took my last $500. I was so terrified of losing them that I let them bleed me dry. But all of that was about to change. The idea for the Caribbean cruise started exactly the way all of their financial ambushes did, with a perfectly choreographed theatrical performance over dinner. It was a chilly Friday evening in early November. I had invited my parents, Vincent, his incredibly entitled fiancée Chloe, and my Aunt Carol over to my downtown condo for Thanksgiving dinner. I had spent all day cooking a massive turkey, trying to create the perfect holiday atmosphere. For a fleeting hour, as we sat around my expensive mahogany dining table, things actually felt somewhat normal. Then, right as I was slicing the pecan pie, Aunt Carol leaned back in her chair and let out a dramatic, wistful sigh. She was my mother's older sister, and she was the undisputed mastermind of family guilt trips. You know, Aunt Carol said, her voice dripping with artificial melancholy as she stared out the window at the city skyline. Susan and Richard have worked so hard their entire lives. It breaks my heart that they've never seen the world. Never even been to the Caribbean. My mom picked up her cue with Oscar-worthy precision. She lowered her eyes and dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin. Oh, Carol, don't start. We could never afford something like that. Cruises are for people with disposable income, not for people like us who are just struggling to get by. She shot a fleeting, calculated glance in my direction. Vincent, who was aggressively scrolling through social media on the brand new iPhone I had bought him for his birthday, snorted. Yeah, it must be nice to just throw money around on vacations. Chloe and I are so stressed with the wedding planning, we desperately need a break. But we're actually humble. I looked around the table. I looked at my mother's manufactured expression of pure defeat. I looked at my father's silent, heavy scowl. I looked at Vincent and Chloe's aggressive sense of entitlement. It was a perfectly executed trap, and I walked right into it with open arms. A tiny, desperate voice inside my head whispered, "This is it. This is how you make them happy. This is how you prove you belong." "Let me handle it," I said, the words tumbling out of my mouth before my brain could stop them. I just got my end-of-year promotion bonus. It was a massive quarter for the firm. Let me book a family cruise for all of us. As my gift. The table went completely silent. Then the fake protests began. It was the kind of weak, hollow protesting that practically begs you to insist harder. "Oh, Mark. No, we couldn't possibly ask you to do that," my mom gasped, clutching her chest while simultaneously kicking my dad under the table. "That is your hard-earned salary." "It's not asking if I'm offering," I insisted, desperate to keep the suddenly warm atmosphere alive. "It's for the family. We can all go. You, Dad, Vincent, Chloe, and Aunt Carol. A real family vacation." And just like that, the deal was struck. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. Suddenly, I was the hero again. For the rest of the evening, they showered me with praise. They complimented my cooking. They admired my condo. The intoxicating warmth of their approval washed over me, and I foolishly soaked up every single drop of it. The next 3 weeks were a chaotic blur of travel planning. I didn't just book standard tickets. I wanted this to be a masterpiece of a vacation. I spent hours analyzing cruise itineraries, finally settling on a 7-day luxury voyage through the Eastern Caribbean. I booked 6 premium tickets. I upgraded my parents, Vincent, Chloe, and Aunt Carol to massive balcony suites overlooking the ocean. I didn't stop there. I prepaid for the highest-tier premium dining packages so they could eat dry-aged steaks and lobster every single night. I booked unlimited top-shelf drink packages. I reserved exclusive shore excursions, private cabanas in the Bahamas, a VIP catamaran tour in San Juan, and guided snorkeling in St. Thomas. When I finally hit the confirm payment button, the total balance was $21,840. $21,840. I stared at the bank notification on my phone, feeling a sharp twinge of anxiety, but I forcefully pushed it down. It is an investment in my family, I told myself. It is worth every penny to finally feel included. I forwarded the massive PDF of booking confirmations to our family group chat, eagerly waiting for the explosion of gratitude. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, my phone pinged. It was a single generic thumbs-up emoji from my dad. Nothing else. No phone call. No excitement. Just a digital thumb. I swallowed my disappointment, telling myself they were probably just overwhelmed by the generosity. Fast forward to a month before the cruise. The fateful afternoon in my car on Interstate 25. The 7-word text message from my mother. "You're not coming. Dad wants just family." When I finally pulled myself together in that empty parking lot, my initial shock morphed into a desperate need for an explanation. I tried calling my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I called my dad. Voicemail. I called Vincent. Voicemail. Panic set in. I opened my messaging app to look at our family group chat, hoping to see some sort of follow-up message explaining that this was a bizarre misunderstanding. The chat was gone. It wasn't just quiet. The entire chat thread had vanished from my phone. My hands shook as I navigated to Vincent's contact profile and tried to add him to a new group message. A gray error box popped up on my screen. "You are no longer authorized to message this group." They hadn't just uninvited me. They had digitally erased me. They had kicked me out of the family circle with the press of a button. I drove back to my condo in a complete daze. I locked the door, threw my keys on the counter, and collapsed onto the sofa. The silence of my apartment was deafening. I felt a kind of dark, gutting loneliness that I had never experienced in my entire life. Around 10 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from my cousin Sarah. Sarah was Aunt Carol's daughter, but unlike her mother, she possessed a spine and a functioning moral compass. She was one of the very few people in our extended family who saw the Miller family dynamic for the toxic swamp it truly was. Her message contained no text. It was just a single screenshot. I tapped the image, and my blood instantly turned to ice water. It was a screenshot of a brand new group chat. The name at the top of the screen read, "Miller Cruise Cruise Ship Tropical Drink." I scanned the members. My mom, my dad, Vincent, Chloe, Aunt Carol, and several other extended relatives. My name was noticeably absent. The most recent message in the chat was a photo sent by Chloe. It was a selfie of her and Vincent holding up champagne glasses, looking incredibly smug. Beneath the photo was a caption that burned itself into my retinas. "Chloe, so incredibly excited for a drama-free, luxury vacation. Thank God Mark decided he was too busy with his fancy corporate job to come. It's going to be so much more relaxing without his constant controlling energy killing the vibe." And right beneath that, my own mother had replied, "Mom, I know, honey, is a blessing in disguise. He thinks his money buys him the right to dictate our lives. We deserve this break to just be a real family without him looking down his nose at us." I stopped breathing. The sheer, unadulterated cruelty of it was staggering. They had hijacked the narrative. They were actively taking the $21,000 luxury vacation I had paid for out of my own pocket, and they were painting me to the rest of the extended family as an arrogant, neglectful corporate snob who was too self-important to even show up. I was not uninvited. I was discarded and replaced as the villain in their delusional story. I sat in the dark living room, the pale blue light of my laptop screen illuminating my face as I pulled up the cruise invoices. There it was, line after line. Billed to Mark Miller. Primary cardholder, Mark Miller. Contact email, Mark Miller. Every single aspect of their upcoming dream vacation. Every sip of premium liquor they planned to drink. Every thread of the high thread count sheets they were going to sleep on was legally and financially tied to my name. I didn't cry. The pain had bypassed sorrow and drilled straight into a deep, subterranean well of cold, hard rage. I looked at my name on those binding legal invoices, and the final puzzle piece clicked into place. They thought they could strip me of my dignity, steal my money, and throw me away like garbage. But they forgot one very crucial detail about the responsible one. I controlled the purse strings, and revenge wasn't going to be loud or emotional. It was going to be an absolute administrative slaughter. I did not sleep a single second that night. I sat perfectly still in the glow of my monitors as the pitch-black sky outside my high-rise windows slowly bled into the hazy pink light of a Denver morning. When the sun finally crested the horizon, The emotional hurricane inside me had completely burned itself out. What remained in its wake was a state of unshakable, terrifying tranquility. I knew exactly what I was going to do. At exactly 8:01 a.m., I brewed a pot of strong black coffee, sat down at my home office desk, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the primary booking confirmation email and located the 1-800 customer service number for the luxury travel agency I had used. I took a sip of scalding coffee, picked up my phone, and dialed. After 2 rings, a cheerful voice answered. "Thank you for calling Oceanic Getaways Elite Support. This is Brenda. How can I make your travel dreams come true today?" I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to sound smooth, polite, and completely devoid of the venom coursing through my system. "Good morning, Brenda. My name is Mark Miller. I am the primary account holder calling regarding a group booking. Confirmation number 74, Bravo 3982. I heard the rapid clacking of a mechanical keyboard on the other end. "Yes, Mr. Miller. I have your extensive itinerary pulled up right here. A party of 6 heading to the Eastern Caribbean on our flagship vessel, the Starlight Serenity. It looks like an absolutely magnificent trip. You have the premium packages loaded. How can I assist you today?" "I need to make a few immediate, permanent adjustments to the booking," I said, my tone remaining strictly professional. "Certainly, sir. What kind of adjustments did you have in mind?" This was the moment of no return, the exact second I officially cut the cord. "First," I began, tracing my finger down the itemized list on my screen, "I need to completely cancel the premium dining packages for 5 of the guests on this itinerary." "5 of the guests, Mr. Miller?" Brenda asked, a distinct note of professional confusion entering her voice. "Are you sure? That removes their access to the steakhouse, the sushi bar, and the private captain's lounge." "I am absolutely sure," I confirmed. "They will be perfectly fine utilizing the complimentary main buffet and the standard dining hall. Please process that cancellation." More keyboard clacking. "Understood, sir. That has been removed. The prorated refund of $2,400 will be credited back to your primary Visa card within 3 to 5 business days." A small, electric jolt of pure satisfaction fired down my spine. Excellent. Next, I need to revoke the unlimited premium alcohol passes and the high-speed Wi-Fi upgrades for those same 5 guests. "Okay," Brenda said, her voice dropping the cheerful customer service pitch and becoming highly efficient. "Removing alcohol and Wi-Fi packages for guests Richard, Susan, Vincent, Chloe, and Carol. That will trigger another refund of $3,150. "Perfect," I said. I was a surgeon, and I was methodically amputating their luxury experience piece by piece. "Now let's look at the shore excursions. The private beachfront cabana in Nassau, the VIP catamaran in San Juan, the guided snorkeling. Cancel all of them for those 5 individuals." With every single click of Brenda's keyboard, the crushing weight I had carried on my shoulders for 20 years got a little bit lighter. I was legally and rightfully taking back every ounce of my abused generosity. "All excursions canceled, Mr. Miller. Your refund total is now exceeding $8,000. "Thank you, Brenda. Now we arrive at the most important change," I said, leaning closer to the microphone of my phone. "I need to alter the cabin assignments for those 5 guests." A brief pause on the line. "Alter them how, sir?" "They are currently booked in 5 contiguous premier balcony suites on Deck 9. I need you to downgrade them," I stated, my voice like iron. "I want you to move all 5 of them to the most basic, lowest-tier interior cabins available on the ship. The absolute cheapest rooms you have in your inventory." The silence on the line stretched out for a full 5 seconds. I could vividly picture Brenda sitting in her cubicle, her eyes wide, realizing she had just stumbled into a nuclear family fallout. "Downgrade them to interior cabins, sir?" she repeated slowly, just to ensure she wasn't hallucinating. "I want to advise you that those cabins are incredibly small. They do not possess any windows or natural light, and the only ones we have left are clustered together on Deck 2. Deck 2? I asked. Yes, sir. It is situated directly above the ship's engine room and next to the commercial laundry facilities. It can be quite noisy. A genuine, dark smile touched my lips for the first time in 24 hours. Brenda, that sounds absolutely spectacular. Please finalize that change. Yes, Mr. Miller. Moving 5 guests to Deck 2 interior cabins. And what about your ticket, sir? Brenda asked tentatively. You are still booked in the master penthouse suite on Deck 12. Do you wish to cancel or downgrade your own ticket? This was the absolute pinnacle of my strategy. This was where simple anger evolved into calculated justice. Absolutely not, I said, my voice ringing clear and bright in the empty condo. Keep my penthouse suite exactly as it is. I will absolutely be on that ship. I paused, letting the reality of the situation settle. I just won't be vacationing with them. By 9 a.m., the massive refund was processing to my bank account. But my morning was not over. I picked up the phone and dialed James, my lawyer. James, I said when he answered. The house. Is the listing live? It went live on the MLS at midnight, Mark, James replied, his sharp, legal mind always 3 steps ahead. In this market, a property in that neighborhood priced to sell will move fast. We already have 3 private showings scheduled for tomorrow. Good, I said. They leave for the cruise in 14 days. The moment their flight takes off from Denver International, I want the locks changed. I want a moving crew to pack every single piece of their furniture and put it in a secure climate-controlled storage unit. I will prepay the unit for 3 months. After that, it's their problem. Can we legally execute this while they are in international waters? The deed is solely in your name, Mark. There is no formal lease agreement. You are legally within your rights to reclaim your property at any time, James assured me. It's ruthless, but it's completely legal. Consider it done. For the next 2 weeks leading up to the departure date, the silence from my family was absolute. It was profound and unnerving. I went about my daily routine, packing my luxury luggage, working out, and organizing my finances. I expected a barrage of angry texts or a furious knock on my door, but there was nothing. They were floating along in a bubble of arrogant, blissful ignorance. They truly believed they had successfully discarded me and were about to embark on a lavish, all-expenses-paid joyride on my dime. They thought they had outsmarted the bank. They had absolutely no idea that the bank had just foreclosed on their entire reality. Boarding a luxury cruise ship at the port of Miami is an experience that is heavily dictated by your tax bracket. If you are holding a ticket for the standard interior cabins, your vacation begins with a chaotic, exhausting nightmare. You are forced to stand in a massive, sweltering concrete terminal alongside thousands of other sweaty, frustrated passengers. You drag your heavy luggage across scuffed floors, wait in security lines that snake around the building for hours, and deal with the deafening echoes of crying children and stressed parents barking orders. But if your name is attached to the master penthouse suite, you exist in an entirely different universe. When my black car pulled up to the curb at Terminal A, I did not even have to touch my own luggage. A dedicated porter dressed in a crisp white uniform immediately greeted me by name. I bypassed the sea of frustrated travelers and was personally escorted through a pair of frosted glass doors into the VIP Platinum Lounge. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of expensive citrus. A private concierge handed me a chilled glass of vintage champagne and a hot towel. Within 10 short minutes, I had cleared a private security checkpoint and was stepping into a glass elevator that shot directly up to Deck 12, entirely separate from the general population. The penthouse suite was nothing short of breathtaking. It was larger than my first 3 apartments combined. I walked through the double mahogany doors into a sprawling living room featuring a grand piano, a full wet bar, and a massive sectional sofa wrapped in white leather. The marble bathroom boasted a massive soaking tub situated right next to a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. But the true masterpiece was the private wraparound balcony that offered an unobstructed, panoramic view of the horizon. Resting on the solid oak dining table was a handwritten welcome note from the ship's captain, accompanied by a complimentary basket of exotic fruits and a bottle of scotch that cost more than my first car. I unpacked my tailored suits in the massive walk-in closet, stepped out onto the balcony, and let the warm Florida breeze hit my face. My hard-earned salary, my late nights staring at financial spreadsheets, and that massive corporate promotion had bought me this absolute sanctuary. For the first time in my entire adult life, looking down at the massive ship below me, I felt completely untouchable. I spent my first 24 hours on the Starlight Serenity in total isolation. I ordered a prime rib dinner through my dedicated 24-hour butler service, drank my expensive scotch, and watched the neon Miami skyline slowly fade into the deep blue horizon. I knew my family was somewhere on this massive floating city. I pictured them arriving at the terminal, completely expecting to be ushered into the VIP lounge with champagne, only to be handed cheap blue plastic wristbands and directed toward the mile-long standard boarding line. I imagined the sheer, unadulterated horror on my mother's face when they finally dragged their heavy suitcases down the narrow hallways of Deck 2. I could perfectly envision my father's rage when he opened a heavy metal door right next to the commercial laundry room and realized they were squeezing into a windowless, closet-sized interior cabin that constantly vibrated from the ship's massive engine blocks directly below them. By the second evening, my curiosity finally outweighed my desire for absolute solitude. I decided to leave my penthouse oasis, take the private elevator down, and walk over to the Lido deck, where the main complimentary buffet was located. The buffet was a chaotic sensory overload. It was a massive, sprawling room filled with clattering plates, loud conversations, shouting teenagers, and the heavy, greasy smell of fried food and generic pasta stations. I grabbed a small plate of fresh fruit and found a quiet corner table near a window, simply observing the massive crowd. Took me less than 5 minutes to spot them. They were standing in the dessert line, and they looked absolutely unequivocally miserable. My dad's face was a thundercloud of raw, unfiltered anger. He was wearing a wrinkled polo shirt, and his posture was rigid with indignation as he shoved his tray down the metal rails. My mom looked physically exhausted. Her shoulders were slumped, and her eyes darted around the dining room nervously, as if she was terrified someone from her country club might miraculously be on this ship and see her eating at a public buffet. Vincent and Chloe were aggressively arguing about something near the soft-serve ice cream machine. Vincent was gesturing wildly with a pair of metal tongs, his face red and bloated, while Chloe rolled her eyes, her face set in a permanent, bitter scowl. The toxic cloud of their collective misery was palpable even from 50 feet away across a crowded room. My mom was the first one to spot me. Her gaze swept over the chaotic dining room, searching for an empty table, and locked directly onto my face. She froze entirely. The metal serving spoon in her hand hovered motionless over a tray of chocolate cake. All the color instantly drained from her face, leaving her looking pale, shocked, and genuinely terrified. She aggressively nudged my father in the ribs. He grunted, turned his head, and immediately followed her line of sight. When my dad saw me sitting there, calmly eating a slice of pineapple in my tailored linen shirt, his eyes narrowed into dark, hateful slits. He did not look surprised. He looked furious. He glared at me as if my mere physical existence was a deliberate, calculated insult to his authority. Finally, Vincent and Chloe noticed where my parents were staring and turned around. Vincent's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. It was the hot, volatile shame of a spoiled child getting caught red-handed in a massive lie. I did not look away. I did not break eye contact. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my legs, rested my hands on my lap, and watched them with the mild, detached interest of a scientist observing lab rats trying to navigate a maze. They held a frantic, whispered conference right there in the dessert line, completely ignoring the line of annoyed passengers building up behind them. Then, abandoning their plastic trays on a nearby counter, they began marching toward my table like a united front of absolute misery. My dad reached the table first. He slammed his heavy hands down on the back of the empty chair across from me and leaned forward, invading my space. "What the hell are you doing here, Mark?" he growled, his voice a low, threatening rumble meant to intimidate me. I swallowed my food, casually wiped my mouth with a linen napkin, and gave him a polite, entirely unbothered smile. What do you mean? I am on a luxury vacation. I looked from his red, angry face to my mother's pale, trembling one, and then over to Vincent, who was glaring at me with pure venom. Mom sent me a text message stating that this trip was for just family, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level so the surrounding tables could not hear, but letting the absolute ice in my tone bleed through every single syllable. And last time I checked my birth certificate, I am family. So here I am. My words, so simple and factually undeniable, seemed to physically strike them. They stood there, completely stunned into a heavy silence. They had absolutely no script for this encounter. They had mentally prepared for an angry, tearful phone call while I sat back in Denver. They had not prepared to face me in the flesh, looking completely relaxed, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Chloe's eyes darted down to my wrist. Resting casually on the table was my solid gold-colored VIP platinum wristband. It was the ultimate status symbol on the ship, the physical key that granted me unlimited access to every exclusive area, premium restaurant, and private lounge. It was a stark, humiliating contrast to the cheap, budget-tier blue plastic bands secured tightly around all of their wrists. Her eyes narrowed with dawning comprehension and absolute fury. She finally realized I hadn't just shown up. I had stripped them of their elite status and kept it entirely for myself. Before any of them could rally their defenses or formulate a response, I stood up. I smoothed the front of my jacket, picked up my glass of sparkling water, and smiled brightly at the group. Well, this family reunion has been absolutely delightful, I said, my tone dripping with polite sarcasm. But I have a reservation at the captain's private cocktail hour, and I simply cannot be late. Please enjoy the buffet. I hear the macaroni salad is highly tolerable today. I walked away from the table without looking back, feeling the intense, burning heat of their glares tracking me all the way to the exit. But the real, spectacular karma of the evening was served a few hours later. I had an 8 o'clock reservation at the Ocean Prime Steakhouse, the most exclusive and expensive specialty dining venue on the entire ship. The restaurant was a masterpiece of dark mahogany wood, dim ambient lighting, and white linen tablecloths. I was seated at a quiet, intimate booth with a perfect view of the grand entrance. About 30 minutes into my meal, right as I was finishing a brilliant, rich lobster bisque, I saw my family approach the hostess stand. They had dressed up. It was a clear, desperate attempt to salvage their disastrous vacation and pretend they belonged among the wealthy, elite guests on board. My dad was wearing his only tailored blazer, which looked uncomfortably tight across his shoulders. Chloe was wearing a flashy, sequined cocktail dress, and Vincent had slicked back his hair in a pathetic attempt to look sophisticated. My mother was wearing her best pearls, desperately trying to project an air of upper-class confidence. The impeccably dressed hostess greeted them with a warm, highly professional smile. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ocean Prime. Do you have a reservation with us tonight? Miller, my dad said gruffly, leaning his heavy forearms on the mahogany podium. Party of 5. The hostess typed the name into her glowing tablet. Her perfectly practiced smile faltered slightly, replaced by a slight frown of concentration. I apologize, sir. I am not seeing a reservation under the name Miller for a party of 5. Look again, my mom interjected, her voice tight, defensive, and loud enough to draw glances from nearby tables. My son booked it months ago. We have the premium dining package. It is an all-inclusive luxury booking. The hostess typed again, her brow furrowing deeper. I do see a Miller in our system, ma'am, but it is a solo reservation for a VIP guest currently residing in the master penthouse suite. What is your specific cabin number? My dad grudgingly gave her the deck 2 cabin numbers. The hostess's expression instantly shifted from confused to deeply apologetic, displaying the kind of practiced corporate pity reserved for people who clearly do not belong in the room. Oh, I see the issue now, the hostess explained, her voice remaining polite but carrying clearly across the quiet, sophisticated dining room. I am so incredibly sorry for the confusion, but the steakhouse is a specialty dining venue requiring an exorbitant upcharge. The dining privileges associated with your specific cabin tier are strictly limited to the main complimentary dining halls and the Lido deck buffet. There are absolutely no premium packages attached to your accounts. The color instantly drained from my mother's face. She looked like the floor had just dropped out from underneath her. Chloe, however, bypassed embarrassment entirely and went straight to explosive rage. She turned to Vincent and hissed, her voice sharp and vicious. "You promised me he paid for everything. You swore to me we had VIP access to the whole ship. I am not eating generic buffet food for a week. Ma'am, if you would like to dine here tonight, I can certainly try to accommodate your party." The hostess offered smoothly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "The cost is $150 per person, not including alcohol or gratuity. Would you like me to run the credit card you have on file for your room?" "Yes," my dad snapped, his fragile pride completely blinding his financial reality. He could not stand the public humiliation of walking away. "Run the card on file. The Visa ending in 4212. That was my primary corporate Visa card, the exact card I had used to originally book their entire trip." The hostess tapped her screen, waited 3 agonizing seconds, and looked up with a grimace that signaled total defeat. "Sir, I am so sorry, but that card has been officially restricted by the primary account holder. Cannot be used for any onboard purchases whatsoever. The transaction has been declined. Do you have another form of payment?" They stood there for a full minute, completely frozen in the harsh spotlight of their own public humiliation. Other wealthy diners had paused their conversations and were openly staring at the commotion at the front door. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I genuinely thought his teeth might shatter. Without another word, he turned on his heel